Here we are.
Here we are, Sean. Hey, everybody, welcome to Exploring the Marketplace Conversations. We're doing this live, and this is where you can engage with us live and you can ask questions. And we have a phone number to ask, right? How are people finding out our phone number, Sean, to ask questions?
They're finding out on all of the social media platforms it's streaming on. It's in the chat. So look in the chat and you can find it. And also you can ask your questions in the chat. And we have team members who will put it in for us and send it right here. I have my Google Voice number right in here. And we're answering questions about the marketplace itself. People who are career driven, starting up businesses, CEOs, people who are whatever kind of career. If you've listened to the Exploring the Marketplace podcast, you totally understand it's people who are doctors and lawyers and moms who started a business and whatever. But also, if you haven't listened to it, we're gonna have a really good conversation where you who are working in the workforce of the world, you are a frontliner for God, and we want to help you out. So this is gonna be good. We have our friend David Lee. It was such a fun interview, right? When we interviewed David.
Yeah, he was.
He's awesome. Let me tell you about David, and we'll start right into it. One bite him in. David is an impassioned serial entrepreneur and the CEO founder of Rogue Red, a disruptive real estate development studio, which, Bob, you were really curious last time. If they want to know what that means, he answered it on our podcast, whose aim is to build transformational models for urban communities utilizing entertainment as the core program or anchor. He is also currently launching an entertainment venue startup focused on providing a new progressive model for live entertainment. And I got to know David through our community at our local church. He was helping a lot of our entrepreneurs and business leaders, and they were going to a kind of a group, I think he called it the incubator, where it was just such a phenomenal group. And he helped them to spiritually journey with God in their startup, in their business, in their feasibility. And it was amazing. Like even one woman who worked as my assistant for a long time, master's degree in psychology, wanted to start up a business, and she was convinced this was God. And she went to his incubator for about 8 weeks and realized that wasn't God, that there was something else that was actually more as they did the feasibility. But she needed to be on that journey of figuring it out, and she needed somebody to help do that. And he was the perfect person to help her and many other people in our local community here in LA. So welcome, David Lee. Thanks for being on today. We're bringing him in right
now. No, thank you so much. It's exciting to be here again and just to serve, you guys and your community.
Well, of course, we're excited. And I have a question just to start us out, which is, what are a couple of the keys, the spiritual keys and natural keys to help somebody who has a business in their heart? It's coronavirus season, 2021. They have a business in their heart, though. They know it's God, or they feel like strongly they're burning with it. What are some of the keys you would give them in this time?
Well, I think, of course, as believers, the first thing is the prayer part. And I think the prayer should be a very inquisitive, process-laden prayer. And not just, like we've always said when we did the incubator, we used to have one main rule. And when you pitched, you could never use the 3 words that we love as believers. Like you could not say Jesus Christ, you could not say Holy Spirit and God. So when you pitched, it was on the merits of the idea, not the manipulation that God said it, therefore it has to happen. So we took that as a given to say we're going to just say they're all from God. Now let's work on the merits of it. So I think as you start, you have that aha idea, and it just bugs you. We get so many ideas, but the one that just keeps bugging you and God just keeps reminding you, I would take it to prayer, process it. And I think you guys have said this wonderfully before in your previous podcast. Bring some people around you, vet it through them. We always want our moms to be around to say everything is amazing. But then you have to kind of, go to the next level of friends that you trust are not critical. And we say this a lot. It's not critical we want. I want a critique. And it's very different. And you want someone who wants your success, but will not cover things that they know will be an issue later. So those people, I think, are absolutely important. And then the last part, when you want to take it, and it's a serious kind of next step, is find a community around you. Co-works are great places where they have talks on a monthly basis. They have people that are entrepreneurs, and they can lead you to other incubator types where they will start to vet it out. And not only vet it out, but you may pivot from your original idea. So I think those are the first critical steps before you go out and even try to think this is something worth pouring your life into, because as we all know, that's a lot. That's a huge, you're jumping off the cliff. You better make sure you have everything set. Even if you don't have a parachute, a plan B, you better know where you're going to land this thing and with the right people. So I would say those are the rudimentary, like the fundamental beginnings. And within that, I think that the critiquing part is really important, and then finding that community to do it together with. And I encourage Christian entrepreneurs, it doesn't have to be a Christian incubator. I think there's amazing non-Christian secular places that are awesome. And so they're out there, and we should take full advantage of the resources.
Yeah, I think this generation, especially if you're over 35, you may not know there's incubators out there, because a lot of them, you get introduced to them in colleges, you're getting introduced to them by other startups. And so we didn't have that. I'm 46. We didn't have that when I was young. But now so many people have that in there. We've had different people on the podcast who talked about the venture capital incubator groups or like whatever.
That's right.
And it's available now. So if you feel like you're older and you're not qualified, you completely are. Okay, we have some questions we're going to ask in just a minute from you, our audience. So please send your questions in right now. You can put them in the chat box, and the team will get them to us right now. But Bob, you had a question also for David before we go to our listener audience.
David, you graduated from USC with a degree in architecture, and you talked about it on the podcast, but tell us, how did God lead you into your first entrepreneurial idea?
I've always had ideas, even in architecture, and I, my parents were entrepreneurs, and so was my grandparents, and so it was something that I grew up with. My grandfather, I think till he passed away, was always doing different projects, so it was relatively a norm. So when I went through architecture, met God during college, it really didn't fully manifest until 2008 when I was at that point in development, and that was taken away. I had to, in a way, allow God to help me reimagine myself. And that's when he started to bring those to the surface. And it was kind of a hedging where he forced me to look at that. And so, but I look back, I do want to recognize that even in projects or even in church doing stuff, I was always try to come up with a quote unquote a better idea or different idea, and it was a part of me back then. I think in 2008 that was a divine interruption when that became not just a fun thing I did. It was pay attention to that, and it was brought to the forefront. And then now that's still in the forefront, and everything else has come back in. But that leads the way I see, think, do, ask. The perspective, the grid I have. That's now become the way I do life with God, versus that was a fun thing just to have ideas. So that was the main shift.
So you recognize now, looking back, that God had implanted you with these ideas. You've always seen these kind of things, and help our listeners to understand if they are battling with, is this instinct? Is it intuition? Is it the Holy Spirit? Is it just my idea? Like, how do you differentiate?
Well, I love that verse. I think it's Psalm 37, where it says, if you delight in him, he will give you the desires of your heart, right? And I trust him to stop me if it's not him.
Right.
If I worry about, God, is this you? Is this not you? There's paralysis by that kind of analysis, and it's more of, I've got to trust him enough. And I think, was it Daniel 11:32? It's for those that know him will do great exploits. And I think it's a matter of, primarily for anything in our walk, if we got to get to know him, and as we know him, we will know that voice. The sheep knows his voice. And so when these ideas come, I think we get to venture out, and we will know his affirmation, or when the door closes. And even when the door closes, right, we know sometimes that's still God. So I think it's just knowing him, to me, in the world of entrepreneurship, because there's so many things thrown at you, including what you're asking about, that internal voice. So is this me? Is this God? Or is this the devil? It's knowing that shepherd's voice. And I remember, actually, I had this house of prayer leader contact me and said, hey, can you come talk to our our leaders. And I said, you sure? He goes, well, because they go into the prayer room and they're getting these business ideas and they think it's the enemy and they're praying against it. And and I was like, that's interesting, but I think that's totally God. And it's just, I think we have to, if it's that consistent, I think the bottom line is there's no formula. Like I can't say, hey, what idea is it? Oh, that must be God or not. It is, do you know his voice? Do you recognize a voice?
Right.
And that has to be the way you discern it. And then you have the advisors and friends around you that can confirm. But yeah, that's always the tricky part. But I think that's the key for me is knowing who he is and following that voice.
Thank you.
So good. Well, if you're just joining right now, we're having a conversation with David Lee, who's helped a lot of people in just thinking about their startups and incubating their startup dreams for businesses and entrepreneurship. And so you can ask your questions right now. Feel free to ask them. I'm actually looking at my iPad where we have my team feeding or populating me with questions. And someone just asked, Randall from Connecticut, he said, do you have strategies for if you have a creative idea and you're a creative person, but you're not on the focused, more business end, how to find somebody like that? What would be your strategy when you know you have a brilliant idea?
Well, I think that comes back to what you guys have always talked about. I think it's a community. I believe, I think our reference was Rolodex, which is a little outdated. Your contact list, your contact book. I think broadening that is always going to be a wise thing to do. And so I've set this to, even in our startups with entertainers, saying, hey, go outside of your field, because when they're like this gentleman here, if you're not in that industry or you want to go there, instead of learning that and getting into it, I think having friends, like-minded people to work with, to me, is the first thing that I do. Is I try to find them in my community, ask them questions, ask them advice, and sometimes they'll do it with you. Sometimes they'll introduce you to another amazing person. And I think the community and broadening that community is actually really, really critical. For anyone that is entrepreneurial or wants to start that, I would just say broaden it. Don't stay in that one industry.
Do you have strategies for if you have a creative idea and you're a creative person?
Oops, I thought that was you.
My Facebook went on at the same time. That's great. That is so good. Bob, do you get Shark Tanked a lot?
Are you asking me that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting, David. Just as you were answering that, I yesterday sat in my office with two young people who were thinking about going into business together, and they each have a business and they're running parallel courses. And so they were both, it looked like there'd be a lot of synergy, but I started asking questions like, have your wives met each other? Have other people in your group met each other? Have you put any type of strategic plan together? Have you thought about, and I was asking these questions, have either of you been in partnerships before? And they both had, and both partnerships had blown up. And I said, so how are we going to move forward in this in a way so it doesn't blow up? And I think people don't understand the power. If you're looking for a partnership or looking for somebody to come alongside of you, it's a covenant relationship. And these types of things have to be really seriously thought about and prayed about.
That's so good, especially on the front end. I mean, Bob and I are writing a book together. And just on the front end, we just made a gentleman's agreement as far as royalties and what it all looked like so that it didn't ever get confused. And so I feel like a lot of people who have breakdowns over covenant, it's when something's successful or when finances happen and they never had the pre-conversations and they're not really comfortable talking about hard things or complicated things or business things. I agree, Bob. That's so good. Okay, I have another really good question from somebody, and this is one of my good friends, Samuel Robinson, who's been on the podcast and is listening, and he said, here is my question. What is one decision you wish you didn't make?
One.
Exactly.
I will write a book about all the decisions that I didn't want to make.
Right.
If I look back.
I love that.
Wow. That's a toughie. I think for me, I wish early on in my kind of entrepreneurial journey, I had found someone with a far more greater financial acumen and skill level than myself. Instead of just saying, I'll hire somebody later, an accountant. I think probably that is the number one, that I had someone maybe mentor me or stand in that place to make sure that was almost first, prior even to the idea being really good. I think that would be the number one, is that financial aspect of entrepreneurship. I think it shouldn't be a second step. It should be, if you're serious, find someone who could mentor you, advise you, guide you immediately. And it goes to what you're saying, Sean and Bob, because those partnership things mostly are around money, finances, equity, later. And hey, we're cool, we're friends now. Later, it's like, no, that's not, so I think that would be my number one.
I was super lucky in my life. I had 3 mentors who were in their late 80s now, and it just helped me so much to be able to turn to those guys who had been through it. And when they'd say things to me that didn't make any sense, I'd have to look at them and say, well, they're saying this to me. It doesn't make any sense to me because I don't understand. That's why I'm asking them. Yeah. Even though I don't want to do it, 99% of the time I would follow their advice.
That is so good. I'm just thinking about how everybody who has any success would write a book on this. And I've got to be around a lot of people, and I've been able to ask them the same kind of question. And it's true. Both of what you guys are saying, it's like I'm learning volumes all the time about how to overcome the weaknesses in my own life by installing the right people, relationships, hiring the right, I didn't have the right lawyer, to start out. And I remember, we're trying to just get a deal with our lawyer, and we got a really bad deal. Bad about this 20 years ago, I don't think he would mind me sharing this because he was new. He was in his 20s, he was doing like people's estates, like he was just filing paperwork, and we used him as our lawyer for a video game project we were working on, which we should have never done. So I understand this. Okay, we have like 2 more questions. One of them is, Ruth, you asked, did you start with 0 budget? And I'll just comment on this before David goes, that 90% of all entrepreneurs and business starters start with 0 budget, just so you know. So that's good. It's like they start with less than $10,000 in the bank, according to Entrepreneur Magazine. So that's exciting. But go ahead, David.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. In a way, I do believe it allows or demands innovation. I think if we had a fat checking account, again, I'll even speak to my previous career as an architect. The saying was, if you gave an architect a blank check budget, very difficult to design. But when you give them parameters, I think we have the ability to work within them to be sometimes, I think, more creative. So 0 budget sounds daunting, but I don't think it's the end of it. I think it's actually a great motivator.
Right.
Yeah, right. It's so good. I agree. Okay. Go ahead.
I remember in my business, using credit cards to make payroll when, when it was really small and with no budget and waiting to get paid. And you're just sort of always on that treadmill. And the goal is, am I ever going to get off my credit cards? And then we took the next step and we got a credit line from the bank, a commercial credit line. So I was off the credit cards, but now I had a credit line that I was on. And so these things, they just keep growing, and you use commercial credit in business, but the goal is always to pay it off because you have new revenue coming in. It's not like personal credit.
Yeah, one time when we did one of these live talks about business, someone asked, how long does startup last? And I laughed and I said, could be 10 years. I don't know.
Yeah,
who defines the end of startup? Success defines the end of startup, I think. I don't know. Okay, last question. It's Jen. You asked, is it helpful or a waste of energy to work for someone doing something related to your dream before starting your own project?
It's a great question.
I think it's a great question. It's that timing thing. It's hearing. I think that comes to me. Timing is always about hearing, seeing the market conditions. Is your team ready? I think it's great to learn if you can. If you can apprentice, and it's never a bad thing. I think the question would be, when do you leave to do your thing? That's the tricky part. But I would say, if you have the opportunity to learn, or even if you get to continue to learn as you do your startup, I would keep those options open. If you feel like it's time to move on, start. But I would keep that as another mentor or resource to go back to, because you will need that. So I think it's a great thing.
Right.
But, yeah, a lot of people have in their head that when they move on, that's going to be a broken bridge because they're going to start something similar. But I mean, so many people don't need to think that way. We need to think, how can we build forward versus build away? It's just so different. Well, thank you, David, so much. Bob and I so appreciate you for being on today and just giving us some time for our social media audience.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. And I know this is a great area that I believe, like you guys do, that Christians should really champion this space of entrepreneurship, because we do have an amazing God who is the ultimate entrepreneur, and the mind of Christ is amazing. So absolutely, this is so well worth it.
Bless you. Thank you. Well, for our audience,
guys.
Thanks, David. For our audience here, we're going to be doing more of these. Bob and I are going to jump on with some of our previous podcast guests, and we will be talking to them about things that we have had questions come in from you guys, but we also want to have live questions to be able to talk to them and go deeper in the conversation of exploring the marketplace. And we're excited about this, Bob. We get to do a lot more live.
Yep, this is fun. David was amazing. He's so well balanced, well rounded. I love how much he's obviously in the Word and seeking the Lord for these specific, practical marketplace things.
Well, he's a giant in faith because he's believing for things that he could never do in his lifetime without God. And that's how I met him, and that's how he still is today, which is so awesome. Yeah. And we want to hear from people like that, because faith comes by hearing. So you need to be a part of these conversations. Bob, you and I are going to be doing our Exploring the Marketplace. We're going to start doing these live pretty soon.
I think this is live, isn't it?
Well, this is live too, but I'm saying the whole podcast is going to be live. We're going to do these live.
You didn't tell me that.
Yes, we're going to do it live.
I think I'm going to be sick.
You're going to call in sick that day? I think I got the plague.
Oh my gosh. Ratchet my anxiety up just a little more. Okay, great. Okay, Sean.
So we'll have a new video edition that you can either be with us live, you can watch later, or you can listen to the normal audio edition. If you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe to the Exploring series anywhere you find podcasts. And on Wednesdays, I have my Exploring the Prophetic edition. On Fridays, you have Exploring the Marketplace with Bob and Sean. And we're going to just be a part of your life in a way that I think is going to really encourage you if you're in a career, an entrepreneur, believing for influence, going after the marketplace. Come with us on the journey.
Thanks for joining us.
We're done. Yeah, thanks for joining in. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.